Welcome. I am Loren Norris, and you're watching Story Power TV. And I want to encourage you, if you've watched any of these My Jesus Story episodes, or if you haven't watched all of them, go back and watch all of them, because we have been all across the gamut. We have talked about personal relationships. We've talked about PKs, preachers' kids, who actually walked away from the church, walked away from the family, and went off and did their own thing and still found their way back. And even though not parents, now living a life to model the example of Jesus Christ in their business. We've talked about people who have issues with how do I value myself and how do I value my kids and what does it mean to be an orphan spirit. And I'm telling you, if you have missed those episodes, you need to go back and check those out. There are a lot of interesting stories about what Jesus means to each individual. But today we're going to be interviewing a guy that, well, he goes by a lot of different names. I call him Bruce, and just like he calls me Jim. And I don't know why those names stuck the way they did. A lot of people call him Bruce Carter, but other people got other names for him. I'm going to leave it at Bruce. But Bruce and I have done business together. We've done ministry together. We've done politics together. We've been across the country together and back a couple of times. But today we're going to have a conversation we haven't had before, especially with other people watching. Right. So Bruce, welcome. Thank you for being here. And I'm gonna just jump right in with the same question that I ask everybody else right up front. Who is Jesus to you?
To me, Jesus is my friend, my comforter. I guess that safety net.
Okay. How does Jesus impact your relationships?
Now, I believe the person I've developed into because of the relationship and the comfort that I have. If you ever see it in my readings or writing, it's always about faith and favor. And those are the two things that's me. I mean, my life is built on faith and it's built on favor. And as you journey through life, especially for me, I lost my mom roughly 3 weeks ago, a month. And I've spent so much time alone, not having people to, everybody was there the first week, but I've had it's just be me and the comforter. And, some people's telling me how hard it was going to be or will be. I haven't reached that point yet. And I don't know if it's because I'm so sure that my mother was in a good place, I'm in a good place, and the whole missing part hasn't happened. But when I look over my life, I think back to when I was serving an 18-month sentence in federal prison. Before that, I had already been in the church, and I was a deacon, but I wasn't married at, 18 in the church. And it was just the traditional process of church. So it wasn't the relationship. And there in federal prison, a pastor actually came out and said, hey man, you're in surgery. There's so much in your life that you could do because of your gifts and talent, but you need to try to find that real relationship. And once I got the relationship, I was reading a book called Self-Confrontation. And I went through that process of that book, and it was different. And so in that part of my life, profanity left. How I dealt with women left. I used to have a motto that if women love me, I like them. And now life became different. And so it's that putting on and putting off. And once I really understood the sacrifices that Jesus made, why he made them, and the purpose behind that and what I could do with that relationship, it just became my staple point in life.
So one of the challenges that I see with a lot of people growing up, especially people who've grown up in diverse types of a background, and when I say diverse, I mean some are preachers' kids, some grow up in the hood, some grow up, like I did, redneck, where church was a normal thing, but nobody really was sold out or surrendered to Christ. It was just, church is the right thing to do.
Right.
When you see that kind of diverse background, the understanding of who Jesus is and the reflection of who we become after a relationship with him is totally different. I used to tell people it's like doing a spider doing push-ups on a mirror. What's reflected has to first be there. And so a personality like yours, larger than life, passionate, sometimes loud, always direct. What was that personality like before Jesus reflected it?
always been a great athlete. 3 or 4 sports in high school, college, 2-time All-American. I think I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame. But I was the president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in high school. I wore suits to school. I started the chapter in college. So there was always this longing to have a relationship with God because that's kind of how I grew up. But as I said, it wasn't until that quiet time, that space where you're trying to understand life. But before that, I was always a servant giver, but I didn't have the value for other people, meaning time. If you showed up for a meeting for me, you could wait 2 hours, 3 hours. I had no problem with that because you needed to meet with me. Now I don't do late. I mean, it's like everybody's time is important because it's the respect of the person. So when I serve or I go to work, I'm no longer doing it for the person that I have a contract for. I'm doing it as if I'm really truly working under God because that's who either opened the door for me to have the opportunity, and there's an expectation that there's a blessing. Even if this is not the best person to work with, I want to give them the best service. So all in all is when I wake up, I'll speak for me. When I wake up, I know that it's my job to be the difference maker in the day. So I no longer have to go around and talk about church and give people scriptures and look at people in a certain way. People tell me, man, God bless you, you did this, because I just want to live out a life where people automatically tie me to Christ because of the relationship that I put before them.
So one of the things that I've heard you say several times is, I live by faith and favor. We live in a world right now where there are a whole lot of people who, when they think of the favor of God, it only shows up in checkbooks. Favor shows up by the pretty of the car in the driveway. It shows up by the right spouse on your arm, by the right job, by the right career, by the right name, by the right title behind your name. And people think, well, if God's favored me, then my life should be perfect. Well, what does favor look like on a daily basis?
So favor to me is, I spent this weekend with 8 young men that were in the 10th grade. One was in the 11th because their friend had been killed last weekend. And so these young men decided they were going to get revenge. They live in Waco. The favor is I got a call from Waco, and I was able to remove those kids out of Waco, bring them up here, drop my schedule, work through the weekend, take them back to the funeral, in their anger that someone has to pay for this death, be able to get them to a point to understand you can't fix that. At the same time, being able to apply pressure to the elitists, the politicians, the people that believe they're making a difference, but they're not connected to the kids or the situation. So, because you know me, I sent off emails to everybody. So when I got to the funeral and it was over with, there was an elected official waiting to confront me about the email that included Waco, Dallas, and Chicago. And what's the difference? It's nothing, because young black men are killing each other at an alarming rate, and nobody wants to talk about it. So he proceeded to ask me, who did I talk to, and why did I do the email? Why am I talking about Waco? And at the end of when it was over with, I let him say his piece. I'm like, listen, I got 14 years vested in Waco being a servant, more than you and anyone else. So it's not that I'm going to anybody, because I went to the kids. But seeing those kids go back yesterday morning, because at one point I had to tell a kid, man, I love you. And that kid who was wanting to do all the extra behavior, before he left, he said, Mr. Bruce, I love you. And so that's the favor, being able to be called. Or in the same email that he was upset about, the Dallas officials, people chimed in, and now there is a meeting being formed by the Black Police Association for next week. Now people are coming together for this meeting to talk about real issues that's in the community. But there was some backlash. But there was also, it turned out for good. Or I got an email this morning, because from the email that people disliked, some father whose son was killed in March here in Dallas, who was a graduate of Prairie View, worked at Carter High School, got killed at a studio, and there was no bill placed. And the dad's trying to figure that out. Or in the same deal, having a mother call me whose daughter was killed in Garland last week as a part of a domestic violence, where the boyfriend shot her in the tub, got in the tub, and killed himself. But people want to know, how can you help me through this? And then, so the favor for me is having the ability to stop what you're doing, to listen or help someone else, and everything stay in contact. That's what I consider favor.
Well, and it sounds like that favors too, not just the ability or even the opportunity. Because not just everybody in town is going to fire off an email that everybody's going to care about. I mean, I could go send the same email to the same people and be like, apparently you got the wrong address, delete. You know, it doesn't mean anything. So part of the favor in your life has been that experientially they know who you are because you've persisted in that. That's part of the favor. The other part of that favor, from my perspective, and clarifying for me if I'm wrong, is that you have the calling, the wherewithal, the willingness to say, I'm going to drop everything and I'm going to go tend to this. I remember an encounter myself. The girl was probably 14 or 15 years old, and I was working a night shift at an Easy Mart in Tyler, Texas. And this girl comes in and she says to me, these two guys that I'm riding around with, one of them wants me to be with the other one intimately, and I don't like the other one, I like him. What should I do? I'm like, well, have you ever been with either one of them? She said, I've never been with anybody. And I'm like, it's not my place to answer that question, but you need to be talking to somebody who's got a better interest in you than just, you know, your physical self. And I called a girl that I'd been going to church with. 3:15 in the morning, she gets out of bed, drives 20 miles, and comes to that Easy Mart and sits on the curb with that girl and talks to her for 2.5 hours. And I remember the scripture that came to mind when I saw that. And it was, there's no greater love than this, that a man would lay down his life for a friend. And I think to myself, you know, it'd be easy in the heat of the moment, bullets flying, to jump in front of a bullet for somebody. I don't think I'd have any problem with that. That's the soldier in me. It's the firefighter in me. I'd be willing to lay down my life. But sometimes laying down your life doesn't look like dying. It looks like I was about to go have dinner with my wife. I was about to sit down and watch the game, and somebody's asking me to drop my priorities for what seems important to them and don't matter to me at all. Sounds like that's what you did this weekend, was to lay down your life for a friend. And that kind of behavior is a reciprocal favor. It is the favor of God on you because of the favor that you show to his children. Am I following that right? Do you feel like I'm going in the right direction with that?
Yeah, I think they definitely go hand in hand. In other words, I always tell God that one thing God knows, he can trust me to act, period. And it doesn't matter if a person's a billionaire, they get the same treatment as the homeless person. I think where we failed as believers is we're too often tell somebody, I'm going to pray for you. And that's not biblical. The Bible says, meet the needs of the people. You know, what have you really done for me if you just tell me, oh, I feel for you, I'm going to pray for you? And so it's easier to do that. And
right.
So the action that it takes is, as I said, God knows that I'm going to do it. And I don't count the cost, because the cost is not for me to count. No matter, I know every time I lay something on the line or do, that I got so much coming in return anyway. It's just part of the process. But that's what my life has taught me. You know, I've went from a -1,000 to 300,000 overnight. So I don't worry about money, because I believe that there are so many people that I talk to now who has plenty of money, but their life is jacked up. You know, they don't know how to respond, know how to react. They pray, they do all these things, but they're more fearful of losing the money than getting their life right. So that's the things that I believe, if we can start to bring that back, then Jesus starts to resurface as a value. I believe in many churches and many Christian lives, there's no relationship as to what Jesus did for you to be able to live the way you live. And so we create all these human heroes. When I go back, I'm like, man, that's my guy. You died for me, I got you. And so I think it has to be a little more simpler for people at the funeral. You know, this funeral had maybe 300 kids because it was a high school. I think the opportunity was lost. The message was a good message. But in that point, these kids had on T-shirts, of course, of the young man that died. You know, they were sagging. They had their hats broke to the side. They were in pain, and that's this beautiful blue casket. They marched in with the crown. You saw wings on the shirts. But the message, I believe, was missed because the kids are focusing on the casket so much that the person that was giving the message, had they walked to the casket and talked about the casket and then deflected from the casket that this could be you next or this could be prevented. And I can't put this kid in heaven. I can't make him an angel. But what I can do is, if we take this moment to build this relationship, if something happens to you, I can stand before the people and say, this child I know for sure. And I think those are the things that, as a believer, I want to be the person that everywhere I go, I want people to see something in me that causes them to ask me, how do you do that? Why do you really care? Why is your heart like this for people? And then I'm able to say, man, because, it was done for me a long time ago. And it works.
Right.
Because it works. It's not like, it really works. And I think that's the part that the faith that says, no matter what, I'm going to be okay. And so, that's my Jesus story.
So how do you translate what's happened in your life, that transition through prison back into the world, to look back at the guys that you grew up with? Some are superstars, some are just average Joes, but the guys from where you went to school, guys you hung out with before you went to college. How do you look back now to them and say, I want you to experience the same favor that I've experienced. I want you to walk in the same life that I've walked, to begin to make decisions that have been beneficial to me. I want you to own those decisions as well. How do you transfer that to them?
I think I can just live it out. So prison for me it wasn't bad. It's a federal prison. It reminded me of my college campus. It was just a time out. I think that in life, you start moving like this, it's just a rat race. So it was the ability to remember, I always wanted to go to heaven. So it was the time out. And I think the telling moment when you talk about favor, I was initially working in the kitchen, but the chaplain came to me and asked me to work in the chapel, which was one of the most coveted jobs. So once again, the favor was I got picked.
Without seeking it out.
Yeah. And so that's why I said some people's lives really have a plan that's already laid out. So, I got to play football there. We played basketball. It's not what you see on TV. My clothes were starched, iron, and the whole 9 yards. I had a chance to teach the guards real estate. When I got out, the federal guards gave me a coming home party. There's inmates that I taught real estate that are still doing real estate in the Dallas area. So it wasn't a hard time. It was like an out-of-body experience being in a third world country, and you're like, wow. The reason I knew I would never go to prison again, period, was my mom got sick, and I couldn't help her. And
Right.
Then to see her walk maybe a half a mile with congestive heart failure to come meet me, because that was the distance from the car to there, that in itself, I knew I would never do anything close or remote that would separate me from not having access. And so when I talk to people about incarceration, I'm also talking about incarceration of the mind more than the physical incarceration. And sometimes we need that time out in life, but we really can't get it when we have all these things going on around us. So for me, it was more of a time out for life. I mean, I'm a college graduate. I've been public speaking since I was 9. I'm the guy. So sometimes you need to have that moment of reflection so you can deal with yourself. So to me, it was that break. And it was early enough in life to where it resonated. It wasn't too early where you still got the dumb boy syndrome. You're in that deal where like, okay, that ain't gonna ever happen again, but this is what I learned from it. So now when I speak to individuals that have a felony conviction, you can't tell me you can't go do this, because I don't want to hear that.
Well, and you can prove it otherwise.
Right. And they don't, when I first say it, they like, oh, you don't know, you don't understand. And I just let them keep going. I'm like, tell me why. So I could have had my record expunged, like over and over and over. There was nothing violent But I'm like, I don't need to have it expunged. Just leave it there so I can show people all the things you accomplished. Since that I've received the President's Lifetime Achievement Award for service. So there are some people that would rather hang their head on what they went through 20-some years ago versus what they're doing today. And so,
or they let that what they did 20 years ago stop them from what they could be doing today.
Yeah. And so, as I said, for me, it's I just need to wake up. If I wake up, something good's gonna happen that day. No matter how bad it is, the sky's falling, something good's gonna happen. If it's nothing but me putting a smile on somebody's face at the store.
So, how effective do you feel like this weekend was for those boys from Waco?
I had one of my other young mentees, he's 25, go pick them up. And I asked him, what were they like from the trip up to the trip back yesterday? He said they were different. Now, some of those young men will be removed from the program because they don't want the progress that's needed.
They're not willing to pay the price.
Yeah. So, in the young man I'm mentoring, I'm saying, look, for the preservation of the whole, you can't save everyone. Because he was struggling with the fact the kid that got killed was in the program. He wasn't active when he got killed because he does an evaluation. You're not trying to get it, you're out. So he was struggling with, man, could I have made this different? And my answer was no. So it's just like me and you can talk to some people about Christ till they blue in the face. But right now, they're not going to get it until they go through some things themselves. So we're just basically planting the seed. And that's maybe all we can do. And sometimes we want to do more than plant the seed. We want to water. We want to tear the soil up.
We want to harvest.
We want all of it, right?
See fruit right now.
Right. And that ain't going to happen. Growing up, I was a mischievous kid. I'll never say I was bad, but I was a daredevil. Anything you thought you could do, I could do better because I was smarter than you. And so people remember me being that kid doing everything. But it's always been where people would pour in my life. I was always the person that somebody would trust to do something or try to help. And now, as I continue to mature through wisdom and time, there are people that come back and be like, man, you was a bad kid, but, God knows best. Or it's part of that process. So as I sit here today and I think about tomorrow and I think about, waking up and how we go out to bless people who people have thrown away or forgotten about, that once again, it's just being in a place where God can bless you because God knows that you're going to be a part of that blessing to other people. And that's the part of the faith and favor when I see spiritual leaders, bishops, break down and ravel when trouble knocks on their door. I have a lot of them in my phone that I talk to in their broken moments. And I'm just doing what I could do, but I look at some of the same things and I'm like, oh, there's nothing. It's going to be okay. So it's having a full belief, a 100% confidence that God got me. And I don't know how people get that, or is that just a favor that is placed on people, whether it's Moses parting the sea or it's a David who did the ultimate sin but was able to come back. I don't know what it is, but that's how I see my relationship. So it allows me to stay focused because I see that for me. It's a personal relationship.
I think one of the things you said earlier is probably the best indicator, and it is something that even in the church that we see a challenge with. There are a lot of people who say, I got the theological understanding, I got the genetics, my family's all in the church. And so they feel like I can grow up in this. There are a lot of people who think, well, I grew up in the church, that makes me a Christian. Well, if you sleep in a garage, that makes you a car, right? Because that's the same equivalence. But the reality is the thing that they're missing is the surrender. The thing that they're missing, they're craving the favor, but what they're missing is the surrender. And a key statement that you made earlier is you said, God knows if he calls me to do it, I'm going to do it.
Oh, 100%.
So Jesus' declaration was, I only do what I see the Father do, and I only say what I hear the Father say. And even in I believe it was in Timothy, he said, you keep making these claims, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, tomorrow we're going to go here, tomorrow we're going to go there. He said, why don't you just say, if God wills, then we will.
Right.
And the challenge with a lot of people is they've got these great plans, but they don't have any God plans. They got great ideas. They're a million ideas a minute, but none of those ideas were encouraged by, inspired by, or sent from heaven. And so they're out there executing, like you said, just grinding, doing this work, and wondering why it's not having any fruit. It was because the seeds you're sowing are dead. The place that you're trying to plant them is dead ground. There's no soil to put it in, and because it wasn't God's idea to begin with. But that favor often follows that immediate implicit obedience. Gideon was told, take your army down to the water and let them get a drink. And the ones that don't drink like this, send them home. And his army went from 30,000 people to 300 people, and he went, okay, God, are you looking at the same enemy I am? Because I could use 30,000 people to go against this enemy. And God's like, no, trust me, you got the right 300 right now. And it was about the obedience that allowed God to favor the process of Gideon.
Yeah. So part of when I just kind of look at my life and other people's lives, I know or believe that I could probably be worth $1 billion if I focused on one thing, and that was to make money. So I had one man call me Nat, because the Nat's all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. And then I had people say, man, how do you do all this? Well, my life is a little different. I'm typically in the bed at 9. I'm up at 4. I'm do that 7 days a week. I'm not running around to the clubs. I'm not going on a bunch of vacations. I'm not caught up in the networking. So the amount of time I really put into what I'm doing is probably fourfold what somebody else is doing.
Right.
And so, but with that, things will come into my mind, and they normally are all centered around the betterment of people. And so I believe that, and I said I can't explain it to the satisfaction of people, that, and there may be other people also, that God has says, I need people that are willing to truly care and love for other people. And they don't need to have a title of pastor. They don't need to be a bishop. They don't need to be a prophet. They don't need to be an apostle. They just need to be somebody that I can trust that will go do the work. And if you meet someone and you're not in a titled position, but you're providing the service that's needed, then I believe that you're doing God's work.
Right.
Fist over fist. But if I ask those people to come to a place of worship with me, they'll come because of the trust.
Right.
And so part of what I'm hoping happen is, beyond all the big buildings we have, beyond all the television evangelists, is that Jesus becomes a real force from people's mouth, from people's actions, and from people's heart. The challenging piece is not many people want to talk about Jesus. They'll talk about God, but they don't want to talk about Jesus because there brings conflict from others who can't fathom, well, is he white or black? That stops people. The picture on the wall. And then I started saying, look, guys, Jesus was pretty cool. Remember, he was like, do I really got to die for Bruce and Jim, God? But if that's your will, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So there was a part of him that's like us. Him, her. But if it's your will, I'll do it. So I think if we started to get people to understand that Jesus had this life, according to the Bible, from 0 to 33. It was basically like ours. And then, because God saw fit, was able to use him to this magnitude, that could happen for us.
Right.
And because we don't make it that simple, we don't see people being able to function in a capacity that Jesus did, meaning really loving people. When the Bible says, and you can do these works that I do, even greater, but we see each other. And so we see each other's faults, and we see each other's lack. but we don't focus on the goodness that we do. So these group of guys that I had, these kids, they were, we call it high side and roasting, talking about, but it was always negative. So I said, before I left them on Sunday night, I said, look guys, do me a favor. Practice this week speaking good of each other. When you go back to school, you talk about, say, man, my brother gonna own the biggest business of this. Man, he gonna have the best rap song, or he gonna do this. Man, wait till you see him when he start putting his clothes on, when he really starts stepping out, coming to his own. I said, because you all have been trained to degrade each other.
Yeah.
What you don't understand is words become faithful. And if all you can do is talk negative of each other, and 4 or 5 y'all talking negative, like they call this one little kid, they say look like a possum. He's going to think that when he starts to make contact with other people. You've helped him become self-conscious and maybe now have high self-esteem. But if he can see his boys seeing him as great, he doesn't have to try to put on the alter egos because he's already confident in who he is. I said, that's why we have to be careful how we play with each other with these words. Yep. And so hopefully it's the follow-up. And, we continue to talk about the faith and favor. And I was able to go to a town outside of Tyler 2 weeks ago and speak to third graders. And it was like they were just as excited and ready to go about the importance of taking their test. And you have these young kids, and one tells me that she's depressed. And one says, well, I have ADHD and all these things. So I believe that when I speak of my favor, it allows me to go anywhere and be able to have impact. And that's why I say it's favor, because it doesn't matter about a person's political views, doesn't matter their skin color, it doesn't even matter their age, and it doesn't matter their economic status. I can sit down and have a conversation with you, and we can leave there respecting each other, even if we didn't agree. And to me, that's a very difficult task in the current society and culture that we live in. And so to me, that's one more simple show of favor.
And that's probably one of the reasons we have so much fun traveling around the country, because we can go into a restaurant and have a conversation like this, and people just kind of look at us like, who are you two? Why are you together? What are y'all talking about? And why does it seem like so much fun? And why am I left out? I think one of the things that I hear in what you're saying is that favor, like gravity or gasoline, the gas pump doesn't stand there and go, what color's your car? Is that a Ford or a Chevy or a Toyota? Gasoline says, put me in, I'm gonna give you power to go.
Right.
And I believe that's what the Holy Spirit does. And Romans tells us that the Spirit that raised him from the dead is the Spirit that's alive in us. So the power to do the will of God is already in there. The question is, will we surrender? Will we hear that call? So in the last minute, would you just take a moment to encourage, especially those, I know you have a heart, and I've heard it even just over the last few months, accelerating, a heart for young black men who are struggling in today's society, struggling with the culture, struggling with the lies they've been told, struggling with the lies they're telling themselves about, do I have any value? So take just a moment and kind of wrap up. What would it mean to impose faith and favor, or give the gift of faith and favor to these young men in today's world?
Well, I don't have the favor to give, and I really don't have the faith to give. I can only be an example. But if I was to have any impact, it would be that I knew that several young men got it. And then those several young men was able to give it to somebody else, and then those next groups were able to give it to someone else. Because it takes, change in itself, it takes a commitment. And not many people can be committed to change because it's sacrifice. I have one young man now, he's 25. He started smoking marijuana when he was 12 or 13. And as we've started to talk and just having a conversation, he wants to quit, but now he realized he's addicted. So he had to say, Mr. Bruce, I am addicted. I've tried, I can't go 2 days without it. So I said, but you know what? Once you get this job and you get a few more things that you have to be responsible for, You tire yourself out during the day, you don't need to smoke because you're going to go to bed. And so it's like getting him there because he works hard. He wants to do it. He's changing his diet. And when he got his stimulus check, you can tell when people want to be better. He went and bought a computer and he bought a little old master class. He didn't go buy a pound of weed. He invested in himself. So if I was to have my way and I could stand somewhere and wave a wand, it would be that people understood how valuable they were at this moment and the things that was continually destroying their value. And I think that people wouldn't always want to be a rapper now for the young men to do. They just decide I'm okay with it. Maybe I'm going to be a poet. Maybe I'm going to talk about good things. And so right now, we're losing the battle. Whether you want to call it the devil, evil, Satan, it doesn't matter. Good versus evil. Good is losing the battle every day. And then not enough people are willing to take the blows for talking about good and truth. So a person's more apt to believe a lie.
They're going to hear it more often
than the truth, or to appreciate the truth. So the truth sometimes hurt, but remember the truth is supposed to set you free, and the truth is supposed to do all these things. But not many people want to deal with the truth. So right. I just decided I'm just going to give you the truth. The vast majority of the stuff I talk about is primary data. That means it's my experience. I gather the data so I can passionately speak about it to the ends and to the depths of time. People don't like that. Right? So all I can do is keep putting the work in, keep building a body of work that can be respected, and I can lean on the body of work as to why I have the ability to have these conversations. And if I do that, I look up 20 years from now and there are some people that says these words, man, I just want to thank Bruce Carter for hanging in there with me, opening this door, giving me this opportunity. That's it. Because that's all I can do. I can't force you to get there. I can pray for you, but you may not even connect to the God that I'm praying to. You may hate that God. And are you going to listen? The chances are not. But if I do the work, I'm just crazy enough to believe that God's going to do the other piece, and these individuals are going to get down the road and they're going to be better people. And then because of the experience that they had with me as a believer, they're willing to accept and give Jesus a chance because they believe that there's something good on the other side.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Bruce, for being here. I appreciate you being a part of my life and for investing in me and believing in me and trusting me. And I thank you for taking your time here to come out today. I know it was a long drive from where you're at to come out to this place. And for those of you who are watching, I want to remind you, like Bruce said, there's a value that you have that you don't even know that you have. And I'm going to challenge you to get your face in the Word. Get your face in the Word of God and begin to believe what He says about you. Forget about what your friends said about you. Forget what you think of you when you look in the mirror. Think about what God has said about you and allow that to be the truth that you live by. If you allow your experiences alone to be the only thing that makes your decisions, every bad experience is going to lead you down a bad path. If you allow the truth of God to be that one place that is always where you come back to, forget what everybody else has said. Forget what the news said. Forget what the worst report in the world has said to you or about you, and believe what God said about you, because He made you and He knows the difference. If you will begin to believe those things, and as Paul told us in Philippians 4, think on the things which are holy and true and just and good and pure. If you'll think on those things, your life will be different. I really want to challenge you to take the time to do that. I also want to challenge you, as Bruce said, to love the people around you by speaking positive things into their life. Dale Carnegie said it a different way. He said, give a man a fine reputation to live up to, and he will. That's my challenge for you today. I appreciate you being here and watching Story Power TV. I'm Loren Norris for Tell It Like It Is. Have a blessed day.